Kawhi Leonard has finally been cleared after months of accusations that the Clippers secretly paid him millions. But NBA players aren't just celebrating, they're going off on the reporter who started the whole investigation and demanding answers. And his response is only making things messier. Let's get right into it. On Monday, ESPN dropped a report that changed the entire conversation around Kawhi Leonard. Los Angeles Clippers owner Steve Ballmer has been cleared of the most significant allegation against him as part of an investigation into whether the team circumvented salary cap rules to funnel additional money to Kawhi Leonard. The NBA has found no evidence to suggest that Ballmer funneled money through team sponsors to pay Leonard. According to Don Van Natta Jr., Baxter Holmes, and Ramona Shelburne of ESPN. Think about what that means. For nearly a year, this was the biggest character question hanging over one of the league's best two-way players. Was his max contract secretly padded through a fake job at a bankrupt bank? The answer that just came back is no. The internet didn't wait around to respond. Within hours of the ESPN story going up, fans were flooding timelines with relief and vindication for Leonard, with the headlines circulating everywhere reading that after an 11-month investigation, the NBA didn't find evidence that Clippers owner Steve Ballmer funneled money through the Clippers sponsors to pay Kawhi Leonard and circumvent the salary cap. The phrase going viral across social platforms was simple: Kawhi Leonard is a free man. But it wasn't just anonymous accounts piling on. Players got involved too. Former NBA point guard Ty Lawson went right after the man who started the entire investigation, Pablo Torre, asking on X whether Torre would face any consequence for what Lawson framed as an attempt to damage people's reputations, writing pointedly, "So does Pablo Torre get any fine, backlash, sued, or fired for trying to ruin people's reputation, life, or Pablo can just say, 'Oops, my bad,' and sweep it under the rug." That's a former NBA player, publicly calling out the reporter on the record, hours after the clearing broke. And Torre wasn't hiding either. Instead of backing off, he leaned all the way in. Rather than address the specific finding that Ballmer hadn't funneled money, Torre took to social media to tease that there was more coming, posting that when the time is right, "I am extremely excited for our episode about this," alongside an eye emoji. That's not a retraction. That's not an apology. That's a man doubling down, while an entire fan base and a chunk of the league's locker rooms are calling his year-long crusade into question. So now you've got three distinct reactions playing out in real time. The fans celebrating Leonard's clearing as a vindication, a former player publicly demanding accountability from the reporter who broke the story, and the reporter himself refusing to blink and promising a new episode. That's the temperature of the NBA world right now. Less than a day after this news dropped. Here's why this actually matters beyond just message boards. This investigation has been sitting on top of one of the most important trades of the year. Leonard was already agreed to be dealt to the Toronto Raptors, but that trade has been stuck in neutral because of exactly this cap circumvention question. With the biggest allegation against Ballmer knocked down, the Toronto Raptors' blockbuster trade for Kawhi Leonard is finally clear to move forward, with the NBA's investigation into whether Clippers owner Steve Ballmer funneled money to Leonard through team sponsors, removing the biggest obstacle standing between Toronto and one of the most significant trades in franchise history. That's the headline number right there. Not just Leonard's name being cleared of the worst version of the allegation, but an entire trade, one that reshapes two franchises, getting a green light it didn't have 24 hours earlier. Now, before anyone starts thinking this thing is fully closed, it isn't. The NBA itself came out and pushed back hard on how ESPN characterized the situation. League spokesman Mike Bass said publicly that the article contains numerous and significant inaccuracies, and that results would be made clear once the investigation formally concludes. So there's already a fight brewing between the league office and the network that broke the clearing story, which tells you this saga still has more chapters left. The NBA's preliminary findings don't mean it's all over, and Ballmer is for sure in the clear. According to ESPN's report, the NBA seems to have cleared Ballmer of the biggest potential violation of the collective bargaining agreement, but the league is still looking into whether he overstepped rules limiting what teams can do to facilitate endorsement deals for players. So Leonard is cleared of the worst of it. The trade has a real path forward, and the reporter who built his year around this story just told everyone he's got more to say. That's where we are right now. But to understand why players are going off and why this whole thing carries so much weight, you need to go back to where it all started. Because this didn't come out of nowhere. It came out of one podcast episode that turned into a scandal nobody in the league office could ignore. To understand why NBA players are reacting this hard to a clearing, you have to go back almost a full year to the moment this entire story broke open. Because before there was a clearing, there was an accusation so specific and so damaging that it threatened to blow up Kawhi Leonard's entire legacy. It started with a podcast. Investigative journalist Pablo Torre, who runs Pablo Torre Finds Out, dropped a bombshell episode alleging that Leonard had signed a no-show job to circumvent the league's salary cap, with Torre detailing his accusations on the latest edition of his show, saying Leonard was paid $28 million through Aspiration, a tree planting service that later went bankrupt. The company itself had entered into a $28 million legal agreement with Leonard's KL2 Aspire, LLC. Now here's the detail that made this so explosive. This wasn't some random sponsor. Ballmer himself had personal money tied up in the company. According to later reporting, the probe began after Torre alleged Leonard had signed a 4-year, $28 million no-show endorsement deal with Aspiration, a now-defunct green banking company in which Ballmer had personally invested $50 million, while the Clippers separately struck a $300 million partnership with the firm. $50 million of the owner's own money in the same company paying his own star player $28 million for what looked like nothing. That's the kind of coincidence that makes a league office pick up the phone, and Leonard's side of the deal genuinely looked strange. Reporting found that the agreement was to be terminated if Leonard ever began playing for another franchise, and in the years he was under contract, Leonard never publicly promoted Aspiration or attended marketing events on its behalf. A $28 million endorsement deal with zero public promotion. That's not how endorsement deals normally work, and everybody watching knew it. The NBA had to respond immediately. Spokesman Mike Bass confirmed the league was aware of this morning's media report regarding the LA Clippers and are commencing an investigation. That single sentence kicked off what would become an 11-month process, involving one of the most powerful law firms in the country. The Clippers came out swinging in defense of themselves almost immediately, calling the entire premise false. Their statement read that neither Mr. Ballmer nor the Clippers circumvented the salary cap or engaged in any misconduct related to Aspiration. Any contrary assertion is provably false. But Ballmer himself, when he sat down for an interview, didn't come across nearly as composed as that written statement. In an emotional appearance, he tried to distance himself from the whole arrangement, at one point saying, "I don't know why they did what they did. I really don't," before adding that any speculation would be crazy. These were guys who committed fraud. Look, they conned me. They conned me. That interview did not land well with fans. Instead of calming the situation, it added fuel to it. One fan reacting to the clip said flatly, "No way bro is really throwing Kawhi under the bus on live TV," capturing the general mood that in trying to protect himself, Ballmer had made Leonard look worse, not better. That reaction spread fast, with the framing across social media becoming that the Clippers owner had thrown his own franchise player under the bus, in real time on national television. Around this same period, more layers kept getting added by Torre's continued reporting. He alleged a close relationship between Leonard, Aspiration, and Clippers figures, including minority owner Dennis Wong, who reportedly invested $1.99 million into Aspiration after the bank was already crashing, and just days before Leonard reportedly received a payment from Aspiration for roughly the same amount. That kind of pattern, money going in from ownership right before a strikingly similar amount goes out to the player, is exactly the sort of thing that makes a salary cap circumvention case feel real, even before anyone proves intent. Fans picking apart the numbers online treated it as close to a smoking gun, and it's part of why the accusation grew legs well beyond a single podcast episode. Ballmer, to his credit, didn't try to shut the investigation down. He publicly said he supported the league digging into it, telling reporters he welcomes the NBA's investigation because it will get the facts out there, adding he was quite confident that we abided the rules. He even said he'd want the same standard applied to any other owner accused of the same thing, telling ESPN that salary cap circumvention rules are important to the league, and I'd want the league to investigate. So that's the origin story. One podcast episode, one strange $28 million deal with zero public promotion attached to it, and one owner with $50 million of his own dollars sitting inside the same company. That combination is what launched a formal NBA investigation and put Kawhi Leonard's name under a microscope that wouldn't come off for the better part of a year. And it's exactly why the recent clearing hit as hard as it did. But the story didn't stop at Aspiration. It kept growing, and that's where things get even messier. Here's the thing about this case. It never stayed contained to one company. Just when it looked like the aspiration story might settle into a simple back and forth between Torre and the Clippers, new companies started getting pulled into the picture, and the whole thing widened into something much bigger. The first big escalation came when Torre reported on an entirely separate arrangement. This time, it wasn't a green banking startup. It was the company that makes the Clippers' own scoreboards. Torre's reporting alleged a hidden, multi-million-dollar sponsorship with Clippers scoreboard maker Daktronics, with an insider telling him it was 10% away to circumvent the salary cap. That's a serious allegation to drop on top of an already serious allegation. And Torre backed it up with sourcing that sounded confident. A former high-level Clippers official reportedly told him, with total certainty, "I know Kawhi had a sponsorship deal with Daktronics," going on to explain that people at Daktronics, people within the organization themselves, had told me about this multi-million-dollar deal with Kawhi and Daktronics. They're not a company that you would see a celebrity endorser for. Think about that phrasing for a second. A company that makes video boards for arenas isn't exactly the kind of brand that signs star athletes to promote sneakers or soda. So when a source says point blank that this wasn't a normal celebrity endorsement, that's a red flag that got picked up and repeated across NBA media almost instantly. Then a third name entered the conversation: ESPN's own reporting. The same reporting that ultimately cleared Ballmer of the worst allegation mentioned that investigators had expanded their search to other team sponsors like Daktronics and Boingo Wireless, spending months digging through internal emails, text messages, and financial records. So this wasn't a quick look at one bank account. This became a sprawling forensic review across multiple companies, with financial ties to the Clippers organization, all searching for the same pattern: money moving from ownership-connected businesses into Leonard's pockets in a way that skirted the salary cap. The league brought in serious legal firepower to handle it. The NBA hired the prestigious law firm Wachtell, Lipton, Rose & Katz to investigate the alleged scheme. That's not a firm you bring in for a routine compliance check. That's the kind of legal team assembled when a league knows the stakes are high and the scrutiny is going to be intense, no matter which way the findings go. And the findings, once they started to leak out through ESPN, were more layered than a simple yes or no. According to the reporting, investigators found no evidence that Ballmer or the Clippers used sponsors, including Aspiration, Daktronics, and Boingo Wireless, to secretly pay Leonard beyond his contract. A finding that backs the team's long-standing defense that connecting players with corporate partners is standard practice across the league rather than a cap circumvention scheme. That's a significant statement. It's not just clearing Ballmer of writing checks, it's backing up the Clippers' entire defense strategy, which had always been that introducing players to sponsors is completely normal across the NBA, not something unique or sinister that only the Clippers were doing. The Clippers leaned hard into that argument in their own public statement, laying out their position point by point. They said the Clippers introduced players, including Kawhi Leonard, to companies with which we had business relationships. Making introductions between players and team partners is both ordinary practice by NBA teams and a common request of players and representatives. From there, Kawhi and his representatives handled their own negotiations. The Clippers did not negotiate or dictate the terms of Kawhi's endorsement agreements or determine what he would be paid. Our commercial relationships stood on their own merits. They went even further, directly denying any preferential treatment was baked into those sponsor relationships, stating, "We did not overpay any vendor or provide any sponsor, vendor, or business partner with discounts or other favorable terms to funnel money to Kawhi," and they closed with what amounted to their central defense for the entire 11 months. After nearly a year of scrutiny, the central fact remains true and unchanged. The Clippers did not funnel money to Kawhi Leonard, arrange for others to compensate him on our behalf, or otherwise provide him with undisclosed compensation outside of his NBA contract. But here's where it gets complicated, and this is important, because this is exactly why the league and ESPN are now publicly disagreeing with each other. Even with the direct payment scheme cleared, the investigation didn't just end. According to the reporting, the league is now investigating if the Clippers' introduction to such sponsors constituted a violation of the league's salary cap rules and whether the team failed to properly supervise its employees. That's a different question entirely. It's not did Ballmer write a secret check. It's did the practice of connecting a superstar to team-linked companies, even without a direct check being written, still cross a line the league cares about. And sources close to the situation are already suggesting the league office should tread carefully there. with reports indicating that league and NBPA sources suggested that any attempt to punish the Clippers for introducing a player to sponsors would go over very badly and would likely be challenged. That's the players' union essentially saying, if you try to punish a team just for making an introduction, we're going to fight that, because introductions between players and sponsors happen across the entire league constantly. Meanwhile, the NBA's own communications team wasn't happy with how ESPN characterized any of this. League spokesman Mike Bass didn't hold back, saying flatly that ESPN's story contains numerous and significant inaccuracies, a rebuke that came directly from the league office. And it's worth noting the NBA reportedly didn't even fully cooperate with ESPN on this particular story. According to the league's own statement, which said ESPN's article regarding the LA Clippers investigation, for which the NBA declined to cooperate, contains numerous and significant inaccuracies. The results in this matter will be made clear once the investigation is concluded. So you've got a strange dynamic playing out. ESPN reports a clearing. The Clippers celebrate it. Fans and players react to it as vindication. And the league itself is out here saying essentially, don't get ahead of us. We haven't confirmed anything publicly yet. That tension is exactly why this story refuses to die quietly. And it's exactly why Torre felt comfortable teasing more revelations instead of backing down. And that's just the ownership side of it. There's a whole other piece of this that's just as important. What happens to the trade that's been sitting frozen this entire time, and what it actually means for Kawhi Leonard's next chapter in Toronto. Now let's talk about the piece of this story that affects two entire rosters, and possibly the balance of power in the Eastern Conference. The trade that's been sitting in limbo this whole time because of the very investigation we've been unpacking. Back at the end of June, the Clippers and Raptors agreed on a deal that would send Leonard north of the border. The terms were significant. Toronto agreed to send Brandon Ingram, Grady Dick, unprotected first-round picks in 2031 and 2033, a 2027 first-round pick swap, and 2 second-round picks to Los Angeles for Leonard. That's a massive package. Multiple unprotected future firsts, a pick swap, a young wing in Grady Dick, and an established scorer in Brandon Ingram. That's the kind of return that tells you exactly how much value the Raptors still see in Leonard, even with everything swirling around him off the court. But the deal has not been able to close, and the reason comes right back to the investigation. Reporting made clear that the Raptors were informed that they would inherit the risk of any penalties involving Leonard if they finalized the trade, including the theoretical possibility of his contract being voided. So rather than taking the risk while the investigation remains under wraps, the two sides have kept the deal in limbo. Imagine being the Raptors front office in that spot. You've agreed to give up 2 unprotected first-round picks and a promising young player for a superstar. And there's a real chance the league could void the entire contract depending on what the investigation finds. Nobody wants to finalize a blockbuster and then watch it get unwound months later. That's why this recent clearing matters so much to the trade specifically. Once the biggest and most damaging allegation, the idea that Ballmer personally funneled money to skirt the cap, got knocked down, the single biggest risk factor hanging over the transaction went with it. That's exactly why reporting framed this as removing the biggest obstacle standing between Toronto and one of the most significant trades in franchise history. Now, there's still a wrinkle here, and it's a big one for anyone trying to figure out how fast this actually gets finished. There's a legal quirk in how punishment for cap circumvention actually works, and it might end up saving Leonard regardless of what the league ultimately decides. According to sports law analysis, while the player can be required to disgorge whatever benefits they gain from a third party in a cap circumvention scheme, a player's suspension is not on the menu. In short, Leonard won't be suspended even if he's found guilty. That's a massive detail that fans and players have been discussing since the moment it came out. This was never actually a story about whether Leonard would miss games. The worst-case outcome for him personally was always some kind of financial repayment, not a suspension. That's part of why the mood among players leaned toward frustration with the reporting process itself rather than fear about Leonard's basketball future. There's also a timing element that's been quietly working in Leonard's favor the entire time. If the investigation drags past a certain point, the trade essentially gets to move forward anyway. Reporting explained that the other route is for the investigation to get stuck in arbitration, dragging on until 2027, in which case Leonard can play for the Raptors, as the trade cannot be voided until the salary cap circumvention investigation reaches its conclusion. Right now, that clock is very much still ticking, with sources describing the case as sitting in its arbitration stage, something that works in favor of the two-time NBA champion. Commissioner Adam Silver has been asked about the timeline directly, and even he sounded worn out by how long it's taken. Speaking publicly, Silver admitted the process has gone on longer than I would have hoped, and said he was hopeful it would wrap by the end of summer. That hope hasn't fully materialized yet, even with Ballmer cleared of the headline accusation. The league confirmed it's still examining the softer question around sponsor introductions and oversight, which means a hard final deadline still isn't locked in. That uncertainty is exactly why this recent update landed as such a big deal across league circles, instead of just another update buried in an off-season news cycle. It's not just about clearing one owner's name. It's about a trade that reshapes two franchises' futures, one that fans, executives, and reportedly Leonard himself have been treating as close to inevitable the entire time. Reporting on the situation even noted that despite everything hanging over the deal, the player continues to operate as if the trade will ultimately be completed. So put it all together. A trade package worth multiple future firsts. A superstar who's been playing out this entire investigation as if his next stop is already decided. A commissioner who's publicly frustrated with how long this has dragged. And a legal safety net. That means, even in the worst-case scenario, Leonard was never going to be sitting out games over this. That's the stakes that were riding on this clearing. And it's exactly why the reaction from players and fans hit as hard and as fast as it did. So where does all of this actually leave everyone once the noise settles? That's the part worth sitting with. Because even with the headline allegation knocked down, this story is nowhere near fully closed. Start with what's actually confirmed right now. The worst version of the accusation, that Ballmer personally arranged for team-linked companies to secretly pay Leonard above his max deal, didn't hold up under nearly a year of digging by a heavyweight law firm. That's a real, documented outcome, not a rumor. And it's why the reaction from fans and players carried the weight it did. This wasn't a minor procedural update. It was the resolution of the single scariest question hanging over one of the league's most accomplished two-way players. But the league was careful almost immediately to draw a line between cleared of the big one and fully cleared. Even in confirming there was no direct payment scheme, the reporting made clear the NBA is still working through whether he overstepped rules, limiting what teams can do to facilitate endorsement deals for players. That's a real ongoing thread. It's just a much narrower one than, did the owner secretly fund a max contract through a shell company? And that narrower question comes with its own complications because the league has to be careful about how far it pushes it. If introducing players to sponsors is treated as some kind of violation, just because Leonard's numbers looked unusual on paper, that opens up a fight with the players' union that nobody in the league office actually wants, especially with sources already indicating that league and NBPA sources suggested that any attempt to punish the Clippers for introducing a player to sponsors would go over very badly and would likely be challenged. That's the real tension sitting underneath everything right now. The league needs to be seen taking this seriously, because the appearance of a $28 million no-show job tied to the owner's personal investment is bad optics no matter how it shakes out. But the league also can't set a precedent where every single sponsor introduction, across all 30 teams, suddenly becomes a potential violation, because that's how nearly every star player in the NBA gets connected to brands in the first place. Then there's Torre, who still hasn't backed down an inch. His teaser about an upcoming episode wasn't the tone of someone worried about being wrong. It was the tone of someone who believes there's more to find, regardless of what this particular ESPN story concluded. Whether that turns out to be another real revelation or another round of reporting that gets disputed by the league, we don't know yet, but given the track record of this saga, expect more headlines before this fully closes. And that's really the state of play. Leonard walks away from this round cleared of the accusation that would have followed him for the rest of his career. The idea that his entire max deal in Los Angeles was quietly padded through a fake job at a bank that later went bankrupt for fraud. That part is resolved, and resolved in his favor. The trade to Toronto, the one built around multiple unprotected first-round picks and a young core piece, now has its biggest roadblock removed, and all signs point toward it finally closing rather than collapsing. What's still unresolved is smaller in scale, but not in stakes. whether the practice of connecting him to sponsor companies crosses a line serious enough to draw a penalty, and whether that penalty, if it comes, amounts to anything more than the disgorgement of funds, rather than anything that touches his ability to actually play. Given the legal reality that a suspension was never on the table to begin with, and given how the timeline keeps favoring a resolution that lets the trade go through regardless, the version of this story that ends with Leonard suiting up for the Raptors looks more likely by the week. For now, the players who went off, the fans who declared him a free man, and the reporter who says he's not finished, all three sides are still very much part of this story. The scoreboard, the boards, and the ownership group all had questions raised about them over the last 11 months.